Section 1. A Curious Mind. Born in February the 15th, 1564 in Pisa, Italy, Galileo Galilei was the eldest of 6 children. His father, Vincenzo Galilei, was an excellent lutenist and an incredibly talented man in his own right. His own experimentations with the nonlinear relationship between string tension and pitch were at the time groundbreaking. Now we are, of course, going to be focusing on Galileo Galilei, the man himself, throughout this video, but I think it's only fair to say that Vincenzo was hugely influential on Galileo. His early recognition of his son's numerous talents were likely key to his development because the resources that he poured into Galileo's education must have felt like a safe bet, as he would have no doubt been aware that whatever path Galileo chose, he was likely to succeed. Galileo showed great promise in art, music, and logic, and even for a time considered the priesthood as a possible option. However, at his father's urging, he enrolled in the University of Pisa in 1580 for a medical degree. Galileo's medical studies, however, came to an early conclusion when, after he accidentally stumbled upon a lecture on geometry, he approached his father with the idea of pivoting into mathematics. Now, up until this point, Galileo had been deliberately kept away from mathematics, as physicians had a higher earnings potential. However, his father ultimately allowed the switch, and so began Galileo's education into something that truly captivated him. Section 2. Personal life. By 1589, Galileo was appointed to the chair of mathematics in Pisa. 2 years later, when his father Vincenzo died in 1591, Galileo was now the family breadwinner. This, of course, placed considerable financial burden on Galileo and potentially led to his early desire to invent and generate additional income. In 1592, he made the move to the University of Padua, where he taught geometry, mechanics, and astronomy. During this time, around 1600, he met a woman of a lower social class, Marina Gamba. The two quickly fell in love. However, back then, class really did matter in society, so the pair unfortunately never married. However, they did have 3 children together: Virginia, Livia, and Vincenzo. Sadly, prospects for illegitimate children were slim. Galileo, still at this time, was not a rich man, so he could not afford to offer an extravagant dowry for his daughters. So the worthy alternative was the religious life. Both girls were accepted by the convent of San Matteo in Arcitri, and there they remained for their whole lives. Livia sadly suffered from ill health for her whole life, but Virginia and Galileo in particular remained very, very close until her untimely end in 1634. She truly loved her father, and her letters to him would be a great comfort during his many trials. Happily, Vincenzo had a little more luck. He was later legitimized as the legal heir of Galileo and eventually married well. Section 3. Reinventing the telescope. In the year 1609, Galileo heard of a Dutch spyglass. He didn't just settle at buying one, however. He refined the design and built a series of better ones. First, capable of about 3 times magnification, with later models around 8 to 10 times, and later models still, finally are reaching around 20 times magnification. Pointing this telescope skywards, he made a series of observations which would later be recorded in his short book, The Starry Messenger. Galileo observed the cratered, rough imperfections of the moon, an observation flying straight in the face of Aristotle and Dante. He later observed 3 and then 4 of the now named Galilean moons of Jupiter. He'd originally named these the Medicean stars in honor of his future patron Cosimo II, Grand Duke of Tuscany, and his 3 brothers. His most troublesome observation, however, was of the phases of Venus. This observation and record confirmed predictions made by Nicholas Copernicus, lending support to Copernicus's heliocentric model of the solar system. Section 4. The Church. Galileo's now open support of the heliocentric model caused a major rift between him and the Church, who held that taking such a stance was blasphemous, as it disagreed with the earth-centered ideas held in Holy Scripture. The power of the Church in such matters at the time was practically absolute, and by 1616 they had banned Copernicus's works and warned Galileo to drop his support of it. Never one to be deterred, however, Galileo pressed on, and in 1632 he published a book titled Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems. Within this book, and among other subjects, Galileo would again demonstrate his support for heliocentrism, while at the same time unfortunately causing a perceived slight to the then Pope, Urban VIII, who felt that one of the main characters of the book was based upon him. By mid-1632, the distribution of the book was halted by the church, and they then summoned Galileo to Rome for questioning. At the time, Galileo, now aged 68, was suffering with his health. His vision was failing due to cataracts and glaucoma, and he'd suffered since his early 20s with arthritis, which had not improved with age. He had tried to negotiate with church officials, stating that his book was merely hypothetical. However, unsatisfied, they did not relent. In early 1633, now at the age of 69, he made the grueling journey to Rome. His letters around this time to his daughter Virginia note that he really did fear for the future of his family. However, Virginia remained steadfast in her support of her father, urging Galileo to remain strong. Section 5. The Trial. In April 1633, accused of heresy for promoting heliocentrism, Galileo stood before the Roman Inquisition. Under threat of torture, he recanted, denying the Earth's motion. Legend has it that he muttered, "Eppur si muove," and yet it moves. This is likely a myth, however, I think nonetheless it does capture the man's defiance. The church, now satisfied at Galileo's humiliation, allowed him to return to his family villa in Arcetri, where he dedicated his final years to some of his finest works, smuggling them to Holland for publication. Galileo died on January the 8th, 1642 at the age of 77. Section 6. The Last Laugh. There's just one final bit of this whole story that I found out while researching this whole thing that was a bit too much fun to not share. Almost a century after Galileo's death, with heliocentrism now widely supported, Galileo was moved to a final resting place more befitting his stature and influence. However, during the move, 3 fingers, 1 tooth, and a spinal vertebrae were taken from his body. One of those fingers, specifically Galileo's middle finger, is now encased in a glass egg and on display in the Museo Galileo in Florence. And I just thought it was quite poetic that through all that he suffered in life, he really did get the last laugh with that eternal middle finger. Well, that's everything for today's story, so if you've enjoyed this video, then please do leave a like on it and let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see me make more of these types of videos. So with that said, all I'd like to say now is thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your support in all the ways that you give it. I'll catch you in the next one.